podcast about music, concerts, and shenanigans. I'm Divya.
I'm Savannah.
And we're back with another episode. Hey, we made it to the first official episode of the podcast. Number 1. So, on the day that we're recording this, last Friday, the 23rd, All Time Low just did their second, I guess, Basement Noise concert. It was Rian Dawson set, their drummer. It was pretty lit. It was my first virtual concert of 2020 and my only concert of 2020. Savannah, how did you feel about it?
It was awesome. I may have watched it 5 or 6 times. I lost count.
See, because they have it up like 48 hours after it airs, right? So,
yeah.
Hypothetically, you watched it into Sunday?
Yeah, I watched it at least twice each day. So I guess that's 6.
As one should, seeing as I haven't seen All Time Low since we saw them at their, So Wrong It's Right 10-year show, right?
Yeah, that was 2017?
Yeah.
Christmas?
Christmas, yeah. So
long time.
I miss those boys. They're so good, and I love them. Yeah, but turns out Ryan freaking loves Future Hearts because I'm pretty sure that was like half the set.
Oh, at least. I mean, the first 3, it just came out swinging with some kicking and screaming.
Yup. Came out swinging from a South Philly basement, perhaps?
Caked in stale beer and sweat.
Wrong band. But it's fine. Yeah, and then they played Paint You Wings for the first time ever, which is like, wild. I love Don't Panic, so hearing anything off that album makes me really happy, but specifically Paint You Wings, that song slaps. Was really thrilled to hear that. And then they straight up lied about rehearsals for Stay Awake, because they played Stay Awake and they're like, we haven't played this in forever. I'm like, you guys played this 3 years ago. Like, you had to rehearse for it, right?
That's a long time.
I mean, fair, but considering they haven't toured this year.
True. It was pretty. And Paper Moon. Hold up, we skipped one.
Oh, yeah, we did. And Paper Moon is, like, very near and dear to my heart because that was my first ever Tumblr URL, was under Paper Moon with way too many dashes, and I think the O's were zeros. So,
oh, you got in there late.
I love dirty work. Unpopular opinion.
I'm gonna be honest, all their shit slaps. Future Hearts is probably low tier entry level.
I would say it's low ranking specifically because as an album it doesn't have all the bops, you know?
Yeah, but Ryan did a good, Ryan picked out the 4 good songs. Was it 4 or 5 from
I think it was
there.
5.
Picked out all of the good ones. So you got Wolves in there, you got Cinderblock Garden. I fucking love...
Go.
Sorry,
yeah.
Mom. I love Cinderblock Garden. It's
a great song. And they played off of my favorite Don't Panic, Backseat Serenade, which, I don't know, I don't think I heard it live when they, or maybe they did play it, because I think it was a single. Was it a single? I don't even remember.
I haven't heard it live any of the times I've seen them, unfortunately. Because I love that song.
Friggin' was a great time. What a great song. And they played Clumsy off Wake Up Sunshine, which we missed. We both didn't watch didn't pay for it because we were stupid. The Wake Up Sunshine stream that they did a full album playthrough. And Clumsy is one of my favorites off their new album, and they played it, and I was way too excited, as one gets when All Time Low plays a new song. Yeah, so then they closed with Old Scars or Future Heart, Old Scars, Future Hearts, slash, there's a slash in there somewhere, which the riffs on that slap. I will not be taking any comments at this time. I don't care if you hate that song. Like, general public, don't care. The riffs are great. And then, I don't know, we both stuck around for the Q&A after, right? That was...
Yeah, the Q&A was...
I'm gonna say it was interesting, because I don't want to be rude.
It was like... Yeah, they gave, like, a long enough... Like, they definitely, like, extended it, so people who did pay for it and were watching it live definitely got something. A little something.
Yeah, the fan questions that they asked were really good.
My man Guns.
That wasn't it. Once
they got to him.
Yeah, he didn't necessarily do the best job hosting, as one would hope. But he did pick some good fan questions, so I'll give him that, because they, like, asked about the rehearsal process, which was super interesting, and, like, the set list creation.
He did ask one thing. I forget what the question was, but he got a quote from Alex Gaskarth, "This shit slaps." And that just made my heart feel a little special, because I was like, yeah, man, you get it. He can speak the kid.
Yeah, he's a man of the people. But, you know, we did not mention that we were going to be talking about All Time Low at all in this episode, so maybe we should get into the actual topic for this week, which is pop punk and the history of pop punk and the whys and hows of how we got here.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, enough of the B-side and weirdos. Pop punk. Where to begin? We'll start with the father of pop punk. We'll go for not pop itself. Punk itself. And so punk became popular in, like, the 1960s, following a lot of the anti-establishment movements. A lot of the young people kind of they gathered around, grabbed their instruments, and headed to their garage. And they just started, shredding. That's what you do when you're angry and a teenager. So they were definitely channeling their, like, hatred towards the man in some, punk's pretty known for its, like, short and kind of, I don't want to say harsh, because it's not, I enjoy punk, but it can sound harsh to people. It's kind of like a raw, fast-paced, guitar-based music. That's kind of the big, like, if you're gonna remember one thing from punk, it's fast-paced, guitar-based. That's its slogan.
And your mom probably hates it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anyone, like, with a "may I speak to the manager" haircut, definitely not a fan. The lyrics were often, like, focused on dismantling the patriarchy, and, you know, who doesn't want to crush the patriarchy sometimes? And not only was it like, style of music, it kind of sometimes it also was, like, a fashion trend. Lots of denim, lots of leather,
studs,
these guys,
studded belts, all
the studs, safety pins. They put safety pins everywhere. Face, clothes, ears. Big vest fans. If you didn't have a vest, a denim or leather vest with some patches on it, I don't think you were allowed into the garages. And big on graphic tees. They were like the OG PG-13 graphic tees that you can get at your local Hot Topic and Spencer's now. It's just all around a little bit in your face, loud, harsh, the type to scare moms and anyone going to Bible group, most likely.
Yeah, it's definitely the weirdos and B-sides of people and genres.
Thanks, Ryan, for that. Or was it Alex?
I think Gunn
One
said
of
it,
them.
honestly, but
Oh, don't give that man credit.
thank you for the terminology. We will be stealing it for forever.
Do you want to give a couple, I don't know, give the people some punk bands? But as a disclaimer,
Some punk bands.
we know that some of these bands might not be, you might call them pop punk, you might call them rock. I'm going off of what the internet says and what my heart tells me, so don't come at me here.
Yeah, please
don't
don't
come at
cancel
Div
us
here.
because we misdefined your favorite band. We're not experts. We're just regular people with regular internet access. So, yeah, so some bands would be like The Clash, Sex Pistols, Ramones. You know, your very typical, like, someone's wearing a graphic band tee, and they may not necessarily know it's a band shirt.
Yeah.
Seems fair?
Yeah, I'd say that. And, like, plaid pants. I feel like they pair them with plaid pants a lot. That's...
Ooh, yes. Or, like, yeah, plaid pants and denim jackets. That's the look. And, like, docks.
Oh, yeah. Now you know. You guys know exactly what we're talking about. Glad we're on the same page here.
Always.
And so punk, that's the punk side of pop punk. And a lot of people think that the pop side is from popular, which I'm not saying it's not. Pop punk definitely had its day, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But the pop side of pop punk, at least in the beginning, came from power pop. It's still a genre of rock and roll, so it gets a little confusing when you call it power pop, but in the late 60s, early 70s, a lot of the pop music was rock. And so this term, power pop, was coined by the one and only Pete Townsend from The Who. Love the man. It was often filled with, like, an upbeat, catchy melody. There was lots of harmonies, like a nice, catchy hook. And the themes were a lot less, you know, fight the power, and more your typical adolescent themes like young love, growing up, a little bit more relatable. A lot of the power pop hashtag. A lot of this came from, you know, the British invasion. A lot of bands not trying to be the Beatles, but drawing a lot of influence from them. A lot like, you know, The Who, Cheap Trick, and Beach Boys. So.
Right. So, you know, pop punk is basically the marriage of those two things. Right?
Or is it?
I'm understanding it correctly. Or is it? What we're here to find out. Just kidding. I personally always thought it was, like, popular punk music. I didn't know that they're, like, the power pop thing, you know, played into it at all. I definitely was one of those people that I was like, oh, it's just, like, punk music that's gone mainstream. Pop punk. But hearing all of that about power pop, it totally makes sense, because, like, pop punk doesn't sound punk at all, really.
Yeah, it's definitely strayed from, and it kind of, like, strayed a little bit through the generations of pop punk. It definitely more seems like, you know, fast-paced, guitar-based music that's hit the mainstream, but it did stem from kind of the clash of the two big genres at the time, the traditional, like, garage punk and power pop.
Cool, we're learning stuff. I love learning stuff. So I guess, like, historically, we're just gonna, like, backtrack here a little bit to the 90s, right? Which is, like, I guess, like, height of punk and grunge, and the, like, inception of pop punk, kind of.
Yeah, so, 90s were big for a lot of the subgenres of rock. The 90s were definitely heavy in grunge, which a lot of people lump into pop punk, but I mean, calling Kurt Cobain a pop punk vocalist is a lot. And I don't think anyone in their right mind would do that.
Yeah, no. Definitely not pop punk. I
So
feel
we're
like you
just
could
gonna put
probably
that
get
out
away
there.
with just calling him punk.
He's punk.
Kurt Cobain,
But he is popularized
not pop punk.
grunge. Not pop punk. Popular
Using
punk,
the terminology.
but not.
It's pop grunge. He's his own genre.
He's his own thing. Okay, where were we? Back to the 90s.
Yeah.
Oh, born in the 90s. Let's go. The 90s were really big into skate culture.
Shout out Vans.
You know,
Shout out Vans. Please sponsor us. We love you.
can't live without my Vans. And bring back Warped Tour.
Yeah, please.
Speaking of the 90s.
Kevin Lyman. Do it.
So, yeah, the 90s, pop punk was a lot of what you'd hear in the skate park. And it was still a bit of anti-establishment, but more of, like, this lack of authority. So more of, like, a, screw you, I'm going to skate where I want. Brought in a lot more of the power chords and melodies and kind of a little bit more articulation from power pop. But it did still pull a lot of style, like fashion-wise, and, again, the fast-paced, guitar-based from punk. So it was a lot of the loud guitars, loud music, and then a lot of people dressing in some plaid. The checker print became really popular the end of the 90s, and lots of studs and piercings still. And a lot of the bands you'd like relate to this are like deep rooted in that skate culture.
Yeah, so like Green Day, Blink-182. I think Good Charlotte was kicking around then. New Found Glory. Kind of like your OG pop punk dads.
Yeah. It's dad rock. Oh dear.
So
They're
then,
dads now.
obviously, after the 90s come the 2000s, which I think is like the first peak of pop punk. Like the early 2000s.
Yeah, so I mean, you owe a lot of this to the big bands like Blink and Green Day. But the 2000s is really where that distinction between like what was power pop meets punk to popularized punk, because it did become so popular, and it was on the radio, like it was everywhere. Lots of kids wanted their Vans, lots of kids were dyeing their hair. It was the scene started in the 2000s, let's be honest here.
Yes. Not
And
to
so
be, I think, confused with, like, scene kids from the 2000s. Because that veers more like emo. Right? No? Am I wrong? I don't know.
No, I would say they're a bit more emo and like the neon metalcore, if that's what you want to call it.
I hate the names for all of these,
so
if we're
weird
going to
saying
be
that.
honest.
We're going to get into this, but Div and I just don't love the labels. We're giving you the history, but
No, we're not into
we're
it.
big fans of umbrella topics, and then just like everything inside of that.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess, like, if we're going to give early 2000s, like, a name, it's like Simple Plan, Taking Back Sunday, more Good Charlotte, more Blink-182, more Green Day, more New Found Glory. And then moving later into the 2000s, it's more bands that, like, kind of we listen to currently. I do listen to those bands, but like not as frequently. So like All Time Low, Mayday Parade, The Maine, Boys Like Girls, 4 Years Strong, The Wonder Years, All American Rejects. Oh yeah, shirt check. Homegirl's wearing a Mayday Parade shirt.
We got some OG Mayday Parade. It's been bleached.
Made Paradier.
Made Paradier. It's Tales Told by Your Dead Friends when they did the 10-year for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
That does sound right.
Yeah, when Div didn't come with me.
Oh, sad. Yeah, so I guess 2000s, I would also say that's when, like, culturally everybody kind of knew what pop punk was, because, like, Warped Tour was really huge. Hot Topic was, like, the place to hang out at the mall. There were, like, your classic mall goths. I don't know if that was a thing where you, in your hometown, but my hometown definitely had, like, the mall goths that would just hang out, like, right outside the Hot Topic. And the mall punks and just, like, the mall people.
Yeah, and so pop punk at this time, like Div said, became a lot more mainstream, but it also kind of strayed a lot from its traditional punk. It was still, big in skate culture, and then the 90s bands were still kicking, but it was a lot more like social anxiety and depression that millennials are facing. So the lyrics became a lot less, sorry, Div's mom, for lack of a better term, it was less of a fuck the man and more of like a fuck my life type thing. And it was a lot of heartbreak, boredom, no one understands me.
Definitely, like, post 9/11 America, kind of dealing with, like, the social reckoning that was happening in the country, because, like, American Idiot obviously stemmed from, like, the George Bush presidency. So, obviously, not all bands kept being political, but, like, Green Day, political band. They're pretty much, like, anti-establishment.
Yeah, they're probably the only ones that kind of held true to that, like, core.
Yeah,
punk.
for sure.
But a lot of well, a day to remember here, it was still a lot of disrespect your surroundings. That general lack of authority remained. Mm-hmm. But the only thing that really tied it to punk was, again, the studded belts and
just the style, really.
Guitar based. Yeah, not much brought it back to its pop its punk ancestors, but Green Day, Billy Joel would hate us for calling him pop punk, but they're really the only band that bridged the gap.
I feel like Billy Joel would just hate us in general, but okay, so I feel like we can't really talk about the 2000s without getting into, like, obviously a huge part of them, which is, like, Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco, Paramore. Like, they were definitely a huge, huge part of the 2000s. But I don't really know, like, I guess people call them emo, but I don't feel like that's the right term for it.
They're not, yeah, so, I mean, the idea behind emo, now people are gonna get at me so hard. There's, emo at its core, which I'm not going into the lesson behind emo right now, but a lot of emo was it was like punk, but a little bit more angsty and a little bit more like internalized and kind of more looking at yourself and the angst within, and versus like the angst without. So yeah, these bands I would definitely say were more emo pop, if anything, pop emo. They definitely still fall under what I would consider pop punk, but with that bit more like they don't want to leave they do want to leave their hometown, but it's not all like pizza eaten with your friends. It's like I'm really sad all the time.
Emo stands for emotional.
Don't be afraid to show your emotions, kids. It's allowed. But yeah, the emo bands definitely became popular. They had like just slapping hooks. I don't even fight me on that. They're great. And a lot more angst. So you really like, these are the bands you put your headphones in.
Yeah.
You're in the car with your mom, just like pretending you're in an edgy music video.
Dramatically staring out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of those.
God forbid it starts raining.
The most dramatic of all of the bands. Yeah, so that kind of brings us into, I guess, the 2010s, which it feels weird calling the 2010s the 2010s, even though we're in 2020 at the moment.
We're in the next
decade. So, reflecting on the last decade, that was definitely, like, more All Time Low, more The Main, more Mayday Parade, more of, like, a lot of the similar bands. Nobody's really stopped making music. But also, like, I guess the new additions, like State Champs, Neck Deep, The Story So Far, kind of those bands, which is, like, the modern pop-punk scene, if you will. Movements, they're behind you. Not actually behind you, but the little flag.
I was like,
how can we forget about Movements? Yeah, so definitely a lot of bands that are in, like, I would say our heavy rotation at the moment.
Yeah. And there's still a lot of new bands are joining, and the last 10 years of Warped Tour, there was still a lot going on.
Yep.
But the pop punk on the radio really died down. You got your synth pop kind of. Is that what it's called?
Alt pop? I've always said, like,
the radio.
Yeah, I'm not. I keep vague tabs on Top 40, but that's about it. It's definitely taken, like, a left turn into, like, more rap, hip hop, EDM-y type music versus, like, guitar based. Of course, unless you're talking about, like, singer-songwriters, but, like, it definitely is more electronic leaning at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And a lot more music festivals popped up. I know for a while, there were plenty of festivals, but Warped was kind of like, it was the big thing to do in the summer, and now, like, you can throw a rock in any direction and hit a music festival in the summer.
Warped is the only one that traveled. So all of these other ones, you have to travel to them. Warped is the only one that I've ever seen that, like, goes on the road, hits every major city, like, the most accessible by far. Whereas, like, Coachella...
Warped. For the people.
Coachella is 2 weekends in April or May, and you have to fly to California, and nobody can afford that.
Yeah, well, that was the problem. So a lot of, we still have a special place in our heart for Warped, and so do, I know, a lot of people, but Warped was starting to die down, and that was because people kind of wanted a bit more bang for their buck that liked other styles of music, and so instead of going to Warped, they'd save up their money and go to one of these bigger festivals like Coachella, Lollapalooza, those guys. So kind of that also helped crush the pop punk that was in the mainstream. But we have good news in that the 2010s are over.
Pop punk is back, baby!
Pop punk's back. We're in the fucking... the roaring 20s. Roaring 20s. So I have high hopes for pop punk to come back. All Time Low dropped a record. Did Blink drop theirs this year, or was it last year?
I think it was last year, but we'll count it. Blink is still doing
There's
stuff.
a lot coming out.
Yeah, there's a lot.
But speaking of Blink, Travis Barker, with his partnership with his boy Machine Gun Kelly,
Mans is doing stuff. I will say that the late 2010s did have kind of a pop punk resurgence, because 5 Seconds of Summer is back on, and not back, they started, but they were on the radio. Fall Out Boy came back, and that kind of was like a reset button on what can hit radio, because I think all of their first singles off of Saves Rock and Roll made it to radio. Everything off of American Beauty, American Psycho made it onto radio. Paramore kind of, they never really stopped, but I think they also became a lot more radio friendly in terms of like Ain't It Fun made it. 21 Pilots, like, really just freaking like destroyed everyone in terms of charts, because like Blurry Face, like Stressed Out made it to the radio, and that's not something you would have ever seen in the 2000s. And then Panic, obviously their High Hopes was like everywhere last summer. I could not escape that song. So yeah, definitely, I don't know if it's like the sound has changed or like radio has changed, but definitely making it a little bit more accessible to like the quote unquote normies to access pop punk.
Yeah, and a lot of the favorite bands that people had in there, the peak of their It's Not a Phase Mom phase, were coming back. And so that probably contributed a lot. It's like these bands that you know, you love, you're lying to yourself if you don't know every word to every Fall Out Boy song. They were coming back, and you're like, man, I love these guys. And it kind of opened the door for what is happening now, which, you know, All Time Low has a top song in 2020.
Yeah, dude,
Machine Gun Kelly's crushing it.
6th week, #1. It's crazy to me because I know they've tried to be on the radio for like a handful of singles I can think of off the top of my head, and they finally did it.
Since
I'm so
the
happy
Dear
for
Maria
them.
days, they finally got back there.
Yeah. Yeah, so we kind of touched on it earlier, but our whole beef with subgenres, I feel like it's worth going into a little bit, because I didn't know they existed for a really long time, and then someone one day was like, that's neon pop punk, and I was like, what is neon pop punk? And why does that sound awful? And then I found out it's like Metro Station, I guess, and like early All Time Low and like early The Main.
Cobra Starship.
303, which is a great band. And I didn't realize they had a subgenre. And then when I started liking 4 Year Strong, and someone was like, oh, that's easycore. I was like, what is easycore?
I have such a hard, like,
why are we making things up to
be
describe
more than
things?
one thing. You can be multiple. Just because you're like slightly harder than pop punk doesn't mean you're not pop punk. You're
right.
still in there. You're just like, so some hardcore kids felt wimpy listening to pop punk, so they're like, no, 4 Year Strong's easycore. And this is not a hate on 4 Year Strong. I love them.
We both do. But like, why are we over labeling here, guys? Like, I understand that you want to be able to describe what you're listening to a random person, but I swear to God, if you say easycore to anyone, they're not going to know what you're talking about. And like, I know these subgenres exist for like pop music, for rock music, for other types of rock music, for indie, for whatever. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I think it was like the height of Tumblr. People really felt the need to, I think it was the little tags they wanted to add. They got hyper specific.
I guess that makes sense.
With the genres.
But like, I swear on my life,
a snob.
I've never searched for anything by that tag. Like, I've never searched by anything by genre. If anything, it's like,
I follow one tag and one tag only, and that's pop punk memes. So I don't care how many easycore, metalcore stuff you got.
Hardcore.
I'm only gonna be looking at. Did I miss hardcore? Hardcore parkour. I'm only gonna be looking at pop punk. I'm sorry. It's the broadest term.
Yeah.
It doesn't scare people. Like, maybe your mom doesn't like it, but for the most part, when you tell people you listen to pop punk, they're not being like, oh, no. It's
The face.
easy.
The face that people make. Yeah, I always say pop punk, and they're
Some
like...
people, if they're snobs.
Yeah, but sometimes you're like, pop punk, and they're like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, Blink-182? And they're like, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, I only listen to Blink-182, guys. That's definitely it. But, so that kind of leads into...
they have enough songs to last.
It's true, they have a lot of music. This kind of leads into my personal beef with pop punk, which I subject literally everyone who likes pop punk to listen to. Okay, look, I love pop punk. I will continue to use the term pop punk. It's the best word to describe what the majority of music I listen to is. However, there are some problems here. If a band puts out a song and their sound is different in that it doesn't match their last album, what happens? Everybody freaks out. It's like they've come and personally murdered your whole family. That's the level of offense people take when a band changes their sound. So, like, for example, All Time Low switched up their sound for Last Young Renegade. Did I think that was a big deal? No. Did everybody else? Yes. To the point that their Spotify bio, and I'm reading this as a quote, says, following a late career dip into pop with 2017's Last Young Renegade, they course-corrected at the start of the 2020s with Wake Up Sunshine. Course-corrected. They put out an album that they liked, and then put out an album that was different after that, and they course-corrected.
I hate fans sometimes because, I mean, I understand you love this band and you want them to keep creating the stuff that you like.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to get old. Right. They need to try other stuff. I mean, if they drastically change.
Yeah, if they put out like a rap album.
Yeah, I'm a little guilty. Like, I don't love the new Grayscale song because I like EP era Grayscale, but do I hate Grayscale now? No. Am I gonna shit talk them? Probably not. Maybe just say I dislike the song. But people get so offended by bands growing.
Right. Like,
you gotta do it. Everybody grows. If you're staying the same, get the hell out of your mom's basement.
Right, like, you're allowed to have your opinions, you're allowed to not like it as much as a previous album. Like, I'll wholeheartedly say I didn't love Future Hearts when it first came out. It's grown on me. I still love All Time Low. I'm glad I stuck it out this far because everything that's come out after that has been really good. Future Hearts is still really good. Like, just because I didn't like it as much doesn't mean I don't think it's good. But, like, Knuckle Puck put out Earthquake, which, by the way, is a summer bop, and I'm mad they didn't put it out sooner because I would have loved to listen to it for longer. Half of the comments were like, I'm not listening to Knuckle Puck anymore because this isn't copacetic era, and I'm like, bro, like, calm down. Honestly. Just listen to copacetic if that's what you like.
Yeah. A lot of the bands I do listen to, they're all like, I mean, great for them. They're all in, like, happy, stable relationships. But I love, like, the angry crap that they put out, and none of them are putting that out anymore. They're like, yeah, we're happy now. And I'm like, man, but I'm not. Like, I want to yell.
Right.
Give me some yells.
Like, the story so far, Proper Dose came out. Parker Cannon clearly went through it. Like, I don't know how you could listen to that album and not see that man, like, went through it. But he's clearly in a better headspace now. Am I going to be mad that, like, one of my favorite bands is, like, clearly doing better? No. Why would I be mad about that? Also, Proper Dose is a great album, so anybody who has comments about the story so far going soft can personally come fight me. Speaking of this, many dudes, and I am specifically going to say dudes because I have almost never experienced this with anybody else, that are, like, older and grew up on Blink-182 and Green Day, or, like, they like to, point out that those bands are better. Those bands are more pop punk. That they have better music taste than me. I'm sorry I have an open mind. I'm sorry my ears are happy when I hear the sounds of All Time Low. I'm sorry that they're happy when I hear the sounds of Neck Deep. Like, please just...
I'm sorry I like joy in dancing.
Yeah, I'm sorry
sometimes.
I, like, want to bop, and I don't want to be, like, an upset teenager for the rest of my life.
Yeah, these are also just the worst type of people to be around at shows,
Yeah.
but we'll get into that some other time.
Yeah.
These are just the assholes. They want to, like... I think they're just unhappy with themselves, so they want to relive their childhood.
Something. It's gotta be something, because it's, like, between, like, multiple people that don't know each other, they're all the same way. But, on the other hand, there are the normies. I don't know what else to call them. But, who act like they've never heard of the bands you're talking about. Like, if you mention Fall Out Boy, they're like, I don't know them. And then you play Sugar We're Going Down, and they totally know what you're talking about. And then they make you feel like you're 12 because you listen to bands that came out, like, when you were 12, but they still have, like, they have new music, and you're still listening to them, and God forbid you have a favorite band. So, it's kind of like a weird... People are very stuck on their definitions of pop punk, I think. And it, like, creates problems.
Yeah, you definitely either hate it and you're not in there, you hate it and you're in there, or you're fine with it because you want to have a good time and you love all the music that follows under pop punk, and you just miss Warped Tour. Let's be honest. We just miss Warped Tour.
Yeah.
We've missed shows.
Yeah. But also, like, just listening to interviews and reading articles and whatever alternative press posts to their Twitter that I read, it seems like even internally in pop punk, like, the bands themselves kind of experience a weird, like, toxic, like, culture where they're, like, not supposed to be doing super well. They're supposed to be roughing it out for the rest of their careers. They, like, don't really help each other, which is kind of weird.
Selling out.
Yeah, dude, selling out, I don't understand it. Like, I'm sorry that a band is doing well. Like, pop punk, in theory, is, like, mainstream punk. Is, like, right? Like, because power pop was, like, mainstream. And, like, punk was less mainstream. But if we're saying that we have more developed from the power pop side of things, then how is playing an arena selling out? How is changing your sound selling out? As long as the band can back every decision that they've made and thinks that it was the best thing they could have done for their band at the time, I don't see how you can sell out.
Yeah, we're talking pop
right?
punk.
Like,
so this is popular pop punk. And you, like...
Yeah.
It'd be stupid to say, I want my band to suffer. It's like, sorry you have to pay an extra $40 to go see them. Like, be happy that you get to go see them. Be happy they're still a band because they're doing so well. And they have the resources to put out new music that you enjoy.
Right, like, I see a lot of crap when they move to a bigger label or whatever. So now they have a promo budget. Like, you get better music videos, you get better concert lineups, you get better production on stage, they're in better venues, they're not, like, scrounging for food at the bottom of their tour bus. Like, are there any downsides?
Yeah, I guess the big thing is there is still selling out. Like, some bands will just sell whatever they need to. They'll change
for
entirely. But if they're still putting out music that they're, like, proud of, you're not selling out. As long as you're proud of what you're doing and they enjoy it. Like, they didn't sell their soul to do this. They're not just in it for the fame and money.
Right.
Even though those are nice perks. Everyone wants that. Pop punk boys making some basement noise.
Oh, this is such an all-time low episode. It hurts. So that's kind of, like, my personal beef with pop punk.
From this point on, we will mislabel things. And it's okay.
Probably on purpose.
We know.
Maybe on accident. Just look up the bands yourself. It'll be fine. Yeah, so that's kind of it for this episode. I know it was a doozy. Hope you learned something. I definitely did.
You gotta remember, if you take away one thing, besides fast-paced guitar bass, it's remember your PPE. That's pop punk every day.
Take your PPE, kids. Take your PPE.
Wear your masks, wash your hands.
Stay safe out there. Yeah, we're trying to get back to concerts, so be safe. Don't be a dick. Have a nice day.